We're going to take a look at a past paper question. Now, I want to caveat this slightly. At the Nat 5 exam, if they were going to give you a question like this, they would include a graph representation showing you which axis was which. Now, they haven't, so we're going to have to make some assumptions, which means that in the mark scheme there would actually be two sets of correct answers. Right, let's start with finding our important information. Point A represents a journey of 8 miles and costs £14. Point B represents a journey of 12 miles and costs £20. We're asked to find the equation of the line in terms of P and D, and then for it in its simplest form. So we need to watch for that. And then finally, we're asked to calculate the cost of a journey of 5 miles. Now, first thing I would do with a question like this is draw myself a little sketch. And I am going to call that axis P and this axis D. Only reason I've chosen to do it that way is because they say P and D instead of X and Y. So I'm making an assumption here that the points go that way, the miles, sorry, and the costs go up. Right, so if this is our miles, like that, and our costs going up, we've got point A is at 8 miles and £14. So point A and a point B. A is at 8.14. B is at 12.20. Now, the graph itself is not necessary. It's something I do to keep it in my head what it is I'm trying to achieve. So the first thing we're going to do is find the gradient of this line. So if you remember, gradient is your y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. So that's the change in your y over your change in your x. So to keep the numbers easier, I'm going to do 20 take away 14, which is 6, and 12 take away 8, which is 4. They're both even numbers, so I can simplify that to 3 over 2. Now that gives me a line. Our general formula for a line is y equals mx plus c. We now know our m value, our gradient. So I could write that as y equals 3 over 2x plus c. I'm still working with x and y because I'm familiar with that. If I changed it to p and d at this stage, I might make a mistake. So I'm not going to until the end. Right, so for my next step, I'm going to replace the x and y with one of the values. Now I'm going to choose 8 and 14 because they're smaller numbers. So I'm going to replace the x value with 8 and the y value with 14 so we can work out this c value. So I've got 14 equals 3 over 2 lots of 8 plus c. Now I can cancel down. That 2 can divide into that 8, giving me 4. And that gives me 14 equals 12 plus c. The 12 is adding here, so it goes over to take away. 14 take away 12 is 2. So I have my c value equals 2. If I substitute that back into this equation, I have my formula in the form y equals 3 over 2 x plus 2. Now that's not my answer yet. I was asked for the equation in its simplest form, but I was also asked for it as p and d. If you remember, I chose p to be x and I chose d to be y. So I have got d equals 3 over 2 p plus 2. Finally, we're asked to calculate the cost of the journey of 5 miles. So if you remember, my p is my miles and my d is my cost. So I'm looking for d, and that's another reason to have d as my y value, because that gives me it on its own to begin with. I don't need to do any rearranging. But I'm told I'm doing a distance of 5 miles. So I'm going to replace the p with 5. So I've got d equals 3 times 5 over 2 plus 2. Simplify that, d equals 15 over 2 plus 2. 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So d equals 7.5 plus 2 gives me d equals 9.5. And because we're dealing with money, and specifically pounds, we've got d equals, I tell a lie, not quite d equals, we've got the cost equals £9.50. You will find that all of these equation questions will have you find an equation, change it into different letters, and then use that equation to find an answer. It's just a simple substitution for that final question. I hope this helps.